to wander around his house to find a room. Ooh, I'm going to stop talking because you're live stream. Great, it's working.
Let's see. Yes, hopefully. Yeah, but it was so strange that I could not even see the comments. Like, at least, like, yes, sometimes can be problem with adding people, but bringing people online. But okay, I think I can see us. Okay, so hello everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. We are so sorry about some technical problems. So now you should be able to watch us online. And so can I ask someone who's watching us to kindly comment in the chat box if you can see us and if you can hear us well.
I can see us on Facebook, so I think it's working. Well, I can see you on Facebook. Yeah. Yeah, it's working, Lana. I can see on Facebook the video is working fine.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just a little bit delayed.
Yeah, as always.
Okay, so hello everyone again. My name is Svetlana and I'm a teacher trainer. I'm an English teacher. I'm a CFR examiner and also international exams writer and a blogger. And part of my blog is interviewing educators who work in different educational areas. And today I am very privileged to interview Alastair Grant about the Cambridge Delta Module 1. So first I'm going to introduce Alastair. Alastair is an experienced teacher trainer, academic director, ELT author, and public speaker. He is head of English in Buenos Aires and the teacher trainer for International House Montevideo and International House Lima, where he runs the Cambridge Delta 1 teacher training course. He is also a teacher trainer for International House Mexico. Alastair also works as a consultant in Buenos Aires, where he has lectured on both discourse analysis and methodology. He has also been director of studies at International House Montevideo, at International House San Isidro in Victoria, Buenos Aires. Alastair holds an honors degree in English literature and philosophy from the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom, has completed the International House Certificate of Advanced Methodology, all modules of the Cambridge Delta, and Cambridge Train the Trainer Certificate. Alastair has delivered teacher training at international conferences, online conferences for teachers associations, for a variety of publishing houses, universities, and at local schools in the United Kingdom, Argentina, Uruguay, Peru, Chile, Paraguay, and Egypt, as well as at schools in underprivileged neighborhoods in Buenos Aires. In 2022, Alastair founded the Together for Ukraine Teacher Development Project, a series of free talks and webinars to support teachers from Ukraine. So many thanks for this from me personally. Alastair is also the co-founder of the We Are All in This Together Teacher Development Project, which was set up to support teachers worldwide during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Alastair, I'm very privileged to interview you today. Thank you so much for making this time and finding time to come and join this chat. So many thanks, and now over to you, so you can introduce yourself a little bit.
Oh, thank you, Svetlana, and thank you very. I feel like I'm the one who is privileged to join you today. I've been following your work for a while, and I think it's fantastic. So, thank you very much for inviting me to talk. And yeah, as Lana has said, my background in teacher training is originally from International House, and I still work for International House at the moment, and I specialize, apart from anything else, in the Cambridge Delta 1 teaching diploma. And I've been working with Cambridge Delta One since 2016 now. And what's one of the things that's interesting about it, I'm going to tell you a little story. Actually, I hope Lana doesn't mind, but a brief story.
No, of course. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's my story about how I got started with Delta, because I had been teaching for a number of years and I had been loving it. I was teaching adults, adolescents. I was teaching younger learners. I was teaching in company, and I was doing what I was supposed to do, as it were, in the classroom. And I was really enjoying it, but I just felt that something was missing. I felt that there was, I don't know, some kind of a background to it, or some depth that I wasn't following. And although I was enjoying it, like I say, I felt like I needed more. And my director at the time suggested that I took the Delta. So I did. I started with Module 1. Technically, you can do them in any order, but I'd really recommend that people do them 1, 2, and 3, which we'll probably get onto later. But I started with Module 1, and suddenly it was like this whole world had been opened to me of the foundations behind what I was doing in the classroom. Some of you might have the Cambridge CELTA, for example, and I've often heard that described as what to do in the classroom, and the Delta as why you do what you do in the classroom. And suddenly it really was as though there was the curtain was lifted, and behind it was like, okay, so this is all the foundations as to why we teach the way we do. And it also really helped me develop my practice as well, so much in class, and realize the things that I was doing okay but could be improved, and things that I wasn't doing so well that I really needed to work on. So that was my beginnings with the Delta, and yeah, I've not looked back since then. And the Delta's not an easy course, it's got to be said, and the preparation that I had was very good, and I've really thought since then, how can I really help candidates with what is a very, very challenging course to navigate it successfully with as much help as possible. So on the day of the exam, they can sit down and think, right, open the paper, I know what I'm doing. Sorry, Lana, that was probably a bit longer than I intended.
No, that was amazing. I was just listening to you and I just was feeling so happy. It's interesting thing what you mentioned, that those people who did CELTA, so they tell you what to do in CELTA, and Delta explains you why you do it, right? So basically, like those people who are considering doing Delta, so they can join your course, because I know that you are going to run it pretty soon. I think in August, right? Or when are you going to run it?
Yeah, that's right, Lana. It's in August the 4th will be the first session. And what we do is we start with, there is a syllabus for Delta, and it covers every aspect of that. But we start with the second language acquisition theories and methods and approaches initially, and then move on to looking at all the skills and all the systems. What I mean by systems is grammar, vocabulary, discourse, and phonetics and phonology, as well as looking at testing and assessment. This was what was really useful for me, Lana, as well, with two aspects of it. Testing and assessment, building tests that really help students. And I know that sounds like an obvious thing to say, but a lot of the tests that I used to work with, I would be thinking, why are all of the students doing badly with this? Or why is it that, I don't know, if there was a gap fill with Mr. Jones, a red Ferrari, and students were putting things in the present simple and also the past simple. And I was thinking, well, hang on, any of these could be right. So it's about what I learned on Delta was how to construct tests in a more valid and reliable way. And also, apart from that, one of the best sessions for me was materials design as well. Resources and materials is in designing engaging materials and sourcing engaging material for students in the classroom too.
Yeah, so basically Delta is about connecting the dots, right?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah, connecting the
Yeah,
dots.
and I
Exactly.
really
Mhm.
love what you said. So those who are watching us now or who will be watching us later, and if you're considering doing Delta One, you can message us, you can message Alastair, so you can find us on social media, and I'm sure you will be happy, more than happy to do this course with Alastair. So, okay, so I will say quickly about our agenda. So previously we've posted the points that we will be discussing today, so I will just go over them very quickly. So we will be talking what Delta One consists of, the course and the exam, qualifications that are needed to enter the Delta One course, what happens if you fail the exam, reassessment and refund. This is an interesting part. If it's worth taking the Delta One without other modules. And also, I believe for everyone, it's interesting to learn what jobs they can become qualified for after passing the Delta One. And maybe here we can also talk a little bit, maybe if you can say something about the countries or companies, or so this will be the last point. So let's start off. And the first point, so can you say a few words? So for those, like sometimes also when I see on Facebook, when I talk to people, so a lot of people heard about Delta, but a lot of people also have gaps, and sometimes they are confused about some information. So would you mind saying, like, explaining what the course consists of, and also maybe you can mention about your course, and maybe if it differs from other courses, plus also the exam.
Okay, sure. So first of all, just to mention that Delta is, the whole of the Delta is 3 different modules. So module 1, 2, and 3. Module 1 is an exam-based course, and it really is, for me, it's the foundation of everything for the rest of the Delta. It's also the foundation for teaching. I mean, it's all the parts of teaching that I mentioned, as in second language acquisition theory, methods and approaches, skills, systems, testing, and resources and materials. It's all of those aspects. And then module 2, for example, is very different. Module 2 is an extensive course. You can do it intensively. Module 2 is about, apart from anything else, developing your in-class practice. You're observed by teacher trainers doing what you're doing. And then module 3, which I also run as well, by the way, is about syllabus design. So there are 2 possible streams to do. There's educational management and syllabus design. The one I did was syllabus design, and it's about choosing a group of students and, based on their needs and wants and lacks, building a course around that and delivering it. But module 1 is what we're talking about. So it's an exam-based course, like I say, and one of the most important things about that is, imagine if you're training your students for an international exam, maybe the PET, maybe first certificate, maybe any of the Trinity, the Pearson exams, etc. One of the things you need them to be aware of from as early as possible is the format of the exam, and to have like a comprehensive knowledge of how the bits of all the different papers fit together. Thinking about the first certificate, it's not much help if one of your students has never done a keyword transformation before and sits in the exam, opens the paper, looks at it and thinks, oh my goodness, what on earth do I have to do here? Sure, they
like, what is this?
Exactly, that's right, Lana. I mean, they can follow the instructions, of course, but there's a world of difference between following the instructions and having been trained comprehensively beforehand on how to tackle something like that. So really, that's what the course is about. This is Cambridge. So, there is a very specific way that they want you to answer the questions. There's a famous anecdote back years ago when Cambridge brought out the Cambridge proficiency exam, that they gave it to a cross-section of students, and apparently of the native speakers who took the exam, apparently 60% of them didn't pass. And it wasn't necessarily because they didn't have the level of English. It was more like they'd never been trained. So they didn't really know how, the best way of tackling the task. So that's my job, is to make sure that candidates are as prepared as they can be when it comes to the day of the exam. Because like I say, there's such a specific way of preparing it. Am I talking too much, Lana?
No, that's amazing what you're
No?
saying. And I'm actually noting down some interesting points
good.
that you're mentioning. So those teachers, for example, who teach international exams, like you said, for example, Cambridge exams, especially maybe IELTS or maybe C1, C2 or B2, like whatever level. So Delta One specifically would be useful for teachers who teach these exams, right? And also Delta, as you said, as you gave an example about native speakers, so those teachers who decided to prepare for it, so they need some guidance, because also, like you said, something like 60% of native speakers, they cannot pass it if they just take it like that, right? So like Delta is important for those who teach exams, plus also it's important to have guidance and someone who's professional enough to guide you all the way through to the exam, so then you can pass it successfully, right?
I'd definitely say that, Lana, yes, because apart from anything else, I mean, Delta helped me with all aspects of my teaching, definitely. But I mentioned testing and assessment earlier on, and I had already been teaching the Cambridge Advanced exam, what used to be called CAE, before I took Delta. And with my hand on my heart, I have to say, I wasn't quite sure why, for example, there were all the different parts of the reading exam. Like, you know, there's multiple choice, you've got that, and you've got the gap text exercise, and you have the multiple matching, and now you've got a cross-text multiple matching. And I never really questioned it. I just thought, okay, well, you know, it's Cambridge and I'm sure they know what they're doing. And now, having done Delta, I know, yeah, obviously they do know what they're doing. And one of the reasons they know what they're doing is because of all the different reading sub-skills that there are. Now, Scott Thornbury, I think, has an A to Z of ELT has about a dozen different reading sub-skills. So what Cambridge try and do is try and test as many of the learners' reading sub-skills as possible. But I didn't know about that until I took Delta. And then on the reading section of the Delta One course, one of the things that's explored is all the reading sub-skills and ways of developing, exploiting, and assessing those for students. So, like I say, that, I mean, you know, that's one of the ways in which it opened my mind about why we do what we do in the classroom. So, yeah, we're using the example of exam classes right now, but like I say, for all aspects of my teaching, it really helped. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that, Lana.
Yeah, thank you so much for elaborating here. So yeah, it's actually also another interesting point that you mentioned, like about reading, right? So when we take exams, like one of the skills usually is reading. And for me personally, reading has always been difficult, right? So for those also, for those teachers who prepare for whatever international exams, so they can understand how to prepare such students, for example, like me, who are considering doing IELTS. I have to do IELTS, and the reading is actually, it's no secret, it's the biggest problem for me personally. So when you do Delta, so this will help you to tackle the reading module much more efficiently, right?
I would say so, because apart from anything, it's interesting that you mentioned the IELTS exam. For years, I was an examiner for the writing, the listening, the speaking, and the reading for IELTS. And yeah, that's definitely true. What IELTS tries to do again is test these different sub-skills. So it does open awareness of that as well. And yeah, I think I can't remember off the top of my head, I think there's three main parts or three texts to read for the IELTS exam. And then you've got all the different ways of testing it, like, you know, true, false, or doesn't say, that kind of, or not given. That's right, isn't it? It says not given. So how
and
it
it's so
is that
confusing, actually.
And it's quite confusing, right?
Really confusing.
Right, and it's one thing saying to students, well, all it means is if there's no information in the text, and right, but the way obviously these texts are written, it looks like there is that information in the text, and it's not that black and white. So yeah, again, that's one of the helpful things for me. when I became an IELTS examiner was having done Delta is looking at that and being able to develop student sub skills in that way as well. So yeah, no, helpful all round with that kind of thing, definitely. And in fact, on my course, we actually use the IELTS exam as an example for testing and assessment, and also for in the reading module as well. Because there's, well, like, you know, I'm sure people watching this video know as well, there's IELTS is a super high stakes exam. And I heard a statistic the other day, there's something like 3 times the amount of people taking the IELTS exam as there are any of the other Cambridge main suite exams together, which is, you know, just gives you a flavor of how important it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for such a clear explanation. What can you say about the exam? So like once you take the course, right? And the course can be full-time or part-time, and it can be face-to-face or also online, right? And then there's, like you mentioned before, this is an exam based module, right? Module 1. So can you say a few words about the exam itself, what it consists of, how it's run, how often it's run also, so about the exam?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll go with the last thing that you mentioned, which was how often it's run. Not very often is the answer to that. Twice a year. It's the first Wednesday in June, and it's the first Wednesday in December. The Delta 1 exam is run. And there are 2 papers, and not to give too much detail, because I didn't want the interview today to be an information dump and bore everyone, but it's 2 papers, and there's 5 parts to paper 1 and 3 parts to paper 2. There's the different tasks, and they're very different tasks. There's anything from a labeling task where you are given a definition of some term from an English language teaching, and that can be anything from across the whole spectrum of language teaching, anything from, I don't know, discourse analysis to phonetics and phonology to something about second language acquisition theory. And then something like that kind of a task, and you'd have to say, okay, so this is a situation where a learner has an error that is ingrained because it hasn't been corrected often enough, and in later life they're still using it all the time, and you have to say, okay, that's fossilization, for example. Sorry, that's not a brilliant definition of fossilization, but you get the idea. So it's anything like that too, something super practical and the kind of thing that you do in class every day. In paper 1 task 5, for example, there is that's sometimes called an authentic material task. So it could be literally any piece of authentic material. I have seen anything from biographies, you know, the kind of thing of a writer, the kind of thing you'd get in the back of one of the writer's books, to a story from a newspaper, but then also some very, I'm going to say, random things like estate agent's details on a property, like 2-bedroom cottage in Gloucestershire, etc., etc., to a flyer advertising a restaurant. It could be any piece of authentic material. And by authentic, I'm not going to get into a debate about what's authentic or not. Just in these terms, it's like something that has not been created for pedagogical purposes. That's all. And what Cambridge do is they isolate some language. So, for example, from the 2015 paper, it's the biography of George Orwell, and Cambridge have isolated a phrase, which is, for example, you have contributed, somebody said about George Orwell, you have contributed greatly to English literature, or something like that. And you have, so the phrase you have contributed would be in bold. And your job as the candidate, as it were, is to comment and say as many things as you can about have contributed. So you would need to say, for example, that it's the past perfect simple, the auxiliary verb is have, the main verb is in the past participle, etc. Just like you would write on the board for your students if you were teaching them the present perfect simple. So it's really what I love about the Delta 1 exam. let me back up for a second. A lot of exams can be, especially higher education exams, regurgitation of information. Sorry about the mental image, but you know what I mean. What's lovely about the Cambridge Delta One, what's so useful about it, is what Cambridge want to see is that you're able to apply what you're learning on the course into in-class contexts. So you learn with me, for example, all about, just for example, grammar and vocabulary, the ins and outs of different types of lexical phrase and what the difference are between finite and non-finite verbs and things like that. And what you need to do is then apply that to an in-class situation. So like I'm saying, you need to analyze language in the kind of detail that you explain to students, but with all the theoretical background that's provided on the course. So yeah, that's one way in which it's like super practical. Another task is, for example, paper 1, task 3, they will literally put you in a classroom. Well, not literally, metaphorically put you in a classroom and say, okay, let's see, this teacher says that getting your students to read aloud in class is a bad idea because whatever reason. And what you have to say is why reading aloud in class might not be a good idea, but why getting students to read aloud in class might be a good idea. So you've got to imagine yourself in the classroom doing that task and seeing the positives and negatives of it. Lana, I've just given you another half an hour long answer to
No, that was amazing.
your
That was amazing,
question.
Alastair. I was
Sorry.
just listening. No, thank you so much. Okay, so just to summarize,
Okay.
and then so we can move on to the next question. So it's run only 2 times per year, because sometimes I can see people asking questions how often it's run. So only 2 times per year, and this is the first Wednesday of June and December, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. First Wednesday of June and December. And to preempt a question that some people might be wondering about, where do you do the exam? Now, it's a paper-based exam. That's just how it is. It's a paper-based exam. And for example, well, it's often the case that basically you have to go to whichever center is running it. Now, here in Argentina, it's basically in Buenos Aires you would need to come to. And Argentina is a really enormous country. So wherever you are, you would have to come to Buenos Aires to do the exam. Other places in the world, I mean, I've had students from literally all over. So, and it might be the case in some countries that you need to, visit another city. For example, I had a candidate last year who lived in, or who lives in Egypt. And luckily for her, the city that she lived in, Alexandria, actually has a center, I think it was a British Council center, actually, where she was able to go and do the exam. It's one of the things that I will help you with as well, because ultimately it's the candidate's got to get there, et cetera, but I will help you with finding a center too, because, it's not the case that people might know where they can sit for the Delta One exam. So I'll help you looking for one of those.
Thank you so much. So you said that it can be run only face-to-face, so there's no online option to take the exam. Is that correct?
Yeah, as I understand it, as of today, there's not an online version of the exam. It's paper-based. I have seen some institutions advertising an online version, but my understanding is, as of today, as of 11 minutes past 12 on the 14th of July, that it is still a paper-based exam. Yeah, face-to-face, as you say, Lana.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm also looking at the comment box, so there are no comments yet. Some people just said hi, hello, some comments about IELTS, some comments about CELTA. So if you have some specific questions regarding Delta One or Delta any module, so please feel free to ask us as we go along. And my next question for Alastair is, what qualifications are needed to enter the Delta One course, or also maybe exams? So because again, on Facebook in many groups, I can see these questions quite often. So can you please elaborate a little bit on this question?
Absolutely. It's a very good question as well. And it's something that a lot of people have asked me. So it's less about actual qualifications or requirements. It's more suggestions, as it were. So it is suggested by Cambridge that a candidate should have like a C1 level of English and have 2 years teaching experience. Now, again, as I understand it, that is the basic. I don't want to say the word requirement because it's not really a requirement. That's basic. That's the basic suggested level, as it were. I think the reason for that is that, well, because of the language of reading and writing in the exam, but as regards the teaching experience itself, there are a couple of tasks where, apart from the input that you get in the course, it's really also about your experience as a teacher. So you putting yourself in a situation or a scenario that you're given and you thinking, okay, well, based on my experience, if I were doing this in the class, I imagine that this would happen, ... whatever it would be. So I think that's the reason why it's suggested that 2 years teaching experience, like post initial teaching qualification, whatever that qualification is. Now, this is another interesting point, Lana, because I mentioned CELTA earlier on. In my teaching context, however, the CELTA is not as widely recognized as the national degree. There is a national degree in language teaching called the Profesorado de Inglés. And that's not only the case in Argentina, but some countries around Argentina as well. So that's what I mean by initial teaching qualification. The interesting thing about the Profesorado de Inglés is it's really in depth, and a lot of it is like the same level as a master's in applied linguistics or something like that. However, in Europe, for example, the recognition that the Delta has is much more widespread. So in many countries, it would be a prerequisite to have Delta for that reason. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, we have a
You're
question
welcome.
here. We have two questions, two good questions.
Great.
One question that we will address a little bit later because that's on our list, and please stay with us until the end and we will be talking about it in detail. There's one more question, really good question from Daniela. Do you get marks like ABC after sitting for the exam? So other marks, or is it just pass or fail, or how does it work?
That's a really good question. I'm going to tell you another one of my little stories, Lana, and Daniela as well. So when I started with Delta, my focus was just, I want to get the Delta. I want the experience. And obviously, I want to have the certificates. And Cambridge do produce very beautiful certificates, it has to be said. They've got holograms and everything. But when we started the course, I was made aware that, it's not just pass or fail. However, it's not ABC like the main suite exams. It's put them in order, as it were. Pass, and then merit, and then distinction. So, and that's the case for all three modules, by the way. And also, so that in order to pass the exam, unlike most of the main suite exams, you need 50% of the marks to pass the exam. And then off the top of my head, I believe that a merit is something like 65, 70, and a distinction would be something like 75, 80. I might have that percentage slightly wrong. I'm not 100% sure without looking at the handbook. But yeah, those are the three grades: pass, merit, distinction.
Okay, thank you so much. So yes, pass, merit, distinction, and
which is different. Sorry, I'm just thinking also. Which is a little different from the CELTA, by the way, because with CELTA, there is ABC. Well, AB and pass. I should put it like that. Whereas Delta, pass, merit, distinction. What's interesting for employers, by the way, I should mention this, is that they do. It is interesting to take into account, what kind of grade, as it were, somebody has had, because how can I put this? Having the delta in and of itself, having a pass to the delta is fantastic, and it really, I think, from my point of view, shows what a candidate is able to do, a pass or a merit or a distinction, any of those three. So, and it also, what's interesting is that it gives a candidate something to aim for as well. That's something else, because on my course, there are 2 mock exams, big spoiler, not just one. So the idea is the first mock exam is I have to check whether you, the candidate, are in conditions, are ready to actually do the Cambridge exam itself. And we have a conversation about that online after the mock exam, once I've marked it, once I've been through it. And then, we sit down on Zoom and say, okay, so, this went well, this didn't go so well. My recommendation is that you do take the exam in June, December, whenever it is, but we're going to need to work on X, Y, and Z. Then about 6 weeks later, there's a second mock exam. So then hopefully you as the candidate are able to see some kind of clear development between your performance in the first mock exam and in the second one. Yeah,
thank you so much. I think feedback is really important for me personally.
Absolutely,
it's really, really important, and because I believe that we just spoke about feedback a little bit before this session, that without the feedback, like we really cannot know if we are progressing or not, right? So feedback is really important. And interesting thing what you said, that there are 2 mock exams, and the second one, candidates for the exam can do 6 weeks later, and they can see if they've made some improvement, right?
That's that's exactly right. So hopefully they'll be able to see that there has been some kind of tangible improvement. The reason for that is, I think, it's important to work with mock exams. I don't think that centers, in my opinion, should go crazy with the amount of mock exams. If, excuse me, in my opinion, if a candidate does, it's something I try and discourage my candidates from doing. Don't sit down and do like 5 mock exams back to back, because you're going to be making the same mistakes in number 2 as you do in number 4 and probably number 5 as well. Which is why what you said, Lana, about feedback is so important. But yeah, that's the idea. If there's only, I feel, in my opinion, if there's only 1 mock exam on the course, then, and if the result is discouraging, then that has an effective filter problem for the candidate. Sorry, I'm coughing here. But therefore, if they've got a second mock exam, then hopefully they are able to see some improvement, especially for the tasks that really needed it. It's often the case that for understandable reasons, like in any international standardized test, students will perform, or candidates will perform better in one type of exam, or sorry, one type of task than they will another. So that's why the idea is to like try and level out the strengths and weaknesses there. That's the idea.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have some other interesting questions, but I also would like to go back to question 2. This is something I had in mind, but then it just slipped my mind. So just a clarification. So regarding qualifications to enter the course and the exam. So you mentioned about C1 level and 2 years of experience. Can you just say if it's mandatory and if it's checked, for example, if a candidate is asked to show some proof if they have some certificates, or is just something that's recommended?
I would say it's something that's recommended. It's my understanding that it's a bit like the ESOL exams, Lana. I mean, in theory, you could say to, not that you would ever do this, but you could say to one of your students, yeah, go ahead, sit the first certificate. Here's a course book. Here's some past papers. Off you enjoy yourself, and they can just prepare themselves, and they can then sit the exam in December or whenever it is, and if they pass, they pass, and if they don't pass, they don't pass. It could be done like that. And no, Cambridge, as I understand it, they're not going to do any background checks in that way. So it's really up to the tutor and the centre to be recommending the candidate to Cambridge. So yeah, again, another long answer to your question, but I would say recommendation rather than anything else, Lana.
It makes sense, because it just will be easier for the candidates to pass it, to make sure that they pass it. Okay,
exactly.
So there's one interesting question from Daniela again. It's a really good question. Does the exam contain activities on how to teach certain topics according to ages or levels, or does it have grammar, listening, and so on? For example, your own level of English. So basically, like, is it just general information, or it's adapted and adjusted to certain personas, ages, levels, and so on?
Right. Okay. So when we're talking about the ages, etc., we're talking about the ages of the of students, perhaps, right?
Yeah, I think of students. Yes, students that you are going to teach. So after you take this course and exam, and so you know better how to approach certain people with certain levels, or students who are of a certain age, for example, young learners, teenagers, or adults.
Perfect. So anecdote for you. Not a very interesting one, but an anecdote for you. Delta used to stand for Diploma in English Language Teaching to Adults. And now it doesn't anymore. It's now something like Diploma in English Language Teaching. That's it. They've kept the brand name Delta, and it's a bit like CELTA as well. What Cambridge did was, as regards the syllabus, it was rejigged so that it also took younger learners into account too. And in fact, one of the things that we start the course with is looking at the beginnings of first and second language acquisition. So and this is something that's on my mind at the moment, because some of you might know I have a 10-month-old son, and something that I'm really paying attention to is how he is learning. I mean, he's not actually, producing full words yet, but how he's engaging with his input around him in terms of learning a language. And learning what certain words mean, and he is responding to certain words, and it's not going to be long before he starts producing them. So translating that to younger learners and second language acquisition, that is something that we look at. And so, yeah, all the aspects of the course are geared towards learners of any age and level. And also, I think what's important, though, a bit like any teacher training, Lana, is when you're taking it, also to think about how you can adapt it for your situation as well. The reason I say that is because there are specific younger learner courses. There are, for example, the Cambridge CELT P and the Cambridge CELT S for primary and secondary. There's also the International House Certificate in Younger Learners and Teenagers. So the Delta is not specifically, it can't be specifically aimed at a particular age group. It's much more generic like that. But like I say, it used to be to adults, and now it's much broader and does take into account younger learners as well. So yeah.
So it will be suitable basically for every teacher who works with different levels and also with different age categories. Right?
Yes, I would say so, Lana. That's right.
Thank you so much. So, Daniela, I hope we could answer your question. If you have more questions, please feel free to put them in the comment box. In the meantime, I have a question for you, Alastair.
Yeah.
So what happens if, I also have heard a lot of stories when people fail the exam. So what happens in this case? Like, is there some kind of reassessment, or like, for example, if somebody took the course and then they didn't pass the course, can they retake the course? Maybe are there any discounts, or are there any privileges to access some materials, for example? So what can you say about failing the exam?
Okay, so, well, as regards the purely quotidian aspect of failing as far as Cambridge is concerned, as I understand it, if you don't pass the exam, that's a shame, but it's not possible, as I understand it, to get a report on your performance. It is with Module 3, but not with Module 1, as I understand it. Now, what it's a question of is a bit like, I mean, the situation would be try in that respect, Lana, seeing the module 1 as like the first certificate exam. If one doesn't pass the first certificate exam, it's really the center, the tutors, the candidates' responsibility to be aware of the areas in which they're lacking. I'm not going to let any of my candidates sit for the Delta 1 exam if I don't believe they're going to pass it. And honestly, if I've got a candidate who is getting close to a pass mark for the first mock exam, then I'm super helpful. I'm super helpful as well. No, I'm super hopeful that they're going to pass the actual exam itself. So that's one thing. As regards what happens if somebody then fails, okay, just like the first certificate, yeah, you would have to pay Cambridge again to retake the exam. Now, let's talk about money for a second. I can't give you actual prices of how much it costs to sit the exam. The reason for that is I know that in some centers it costs less and in some centers it costs more. As a general ballpark average figure, I'd say it's around about 250, 300 US. But it really depends where you are in the world as well. And that depends on local conditions, etc. Obviously, like with all the Cambridge exams, Cambridge University or Cambridge Assessment, I should say, try and make it as, how can I make this, say this, locally appropriate as possible. And there are, that sort of ebbs and flows a little bit. As regards me, that's Cambridge. As regards me, if one of my candidates doesn't pass the course, I'm very happy to have a conversation with that candidate about what they want to do and what I can do to help, as in, two things. I have a learning platform which has all the necessary information about the course on it, plus practice material, etc., etc. It's, I don't know how this is going to sound, maybe slightly, I don't know, arrogant or something, but it's a treasure trove, this learning platform. It really is about the material and passing the Delta 1 exam. So I'm very happy for candidates to continue to have access to that. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I really don't. I really don't think centers should take that access away. And I, for my part, am very happy to continue the conversation with the candidate. Like, okay, right, you didn't pass in June. How do you feel about taking it in December? How can we work that out? So yeah, I'm very happy to take that on a case-by-case basis and have that conversation, because I feel very responsible for my candidates too. I really don't want it to be the case that it's like, okay, you didn't pass, well, never mind, bye type thing. I don't want them to feel like that, because if I hadn't passed module 1 and the center had been like that, I would have felt terrible. Yeah,
that sounds cool. I think it's really cool because it's really important what you mentioned. I believe that you don't just like, if you hear the story that someone failed the exam, you don't just say like, okay, like, see you somewhere else, right? So you, like you said, you sit with this person and you discuss actually what went wrong, like to find these like missing points, right? And then you still give the access, so all of the data, all the materials, to make sure that the candidate finally does pass the exam, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's it.
Awesome.
I mean, that's something I want to say as well. It's just talking about Delta 1. It's not a walk in the park in terms of how easy or difficult it is. It's no cakewalk, definitely. However, given my experience when I took the exam, what I've tried to do is really make sure that my candidates, apart from anything else, enjoy it too, so that it's not like, oh my goodness, we've got Delta today and this is really difficult and I really don't know how to approach this task in the exam. I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be an enjoyable process. I want the learning process to be enjoyable for the candidates, because otherwise it's not just all about the certificate. It's not just teaching for the test. Candidates have got to enjoy the whole thing as well. And that's really what I try and do, and make sure that all the homework, because there's homework every class, it's not just the classes itself. I need candidates to do coursework, like 1 or 2 hours a week, to apply what we've been talking about in class to obviously like consolidating what they've learned. Let's say it's phonetics and phonology, Lana, okay? Work to consolidate what we've been talking about in class, but also a piece of homework that directly applies that part of the Delta syllabus to the bit where it comes up in the exam. So where does phonetics and phonology come up in the exam? Well, there's one place specifically where it's guaranteed to come up, and it may come up in other places too. So the homework is specifically targeted at developing candidates for that bit of the exam, so that my candidates aren't feeling like, right, we're learning this about phonetics and phonology, and it's very interesting, but how does this fit in with the exam? That's my aim anyway. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really liked what you said, that it's not only about the goal, like to pass the exam, but also it's about having the enjoyable process, the enjoyable learning process. So this is really awesome.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. There's another question from there's another question from my friend whose name is LJ. We worked together in Myanmar. So he's asking,
hi LJ.
Yes, hello. So he's asking, how can we study before getting into a real test? Do you suggest self-study or take a course from an institute, and where? Yes, I think we already spoke a little bit about it before, right? So can you just like point out the main points about it and just summarize this part, because we already did talk about it today.
No, but it's a really good question, and it's worth mentioning again. Just to briefly summarize, candidates can prepare on their own. You know, you could do that, definitely. Here's the thing. There's such a specific way in which Cambridge want you to answer the questions in both of the exam papers. And when I say a specific way, I'm not just talking about what you need to know to answer the questions. I'm talking about the exam format, is in what you physically need to write on the page and the structure that it needs to take. For example, to give you a bit of a spoiler, Cambridge Assessment are not interested in you writing paragraphs about a topic, for example. If one of the questions might be about the reading aloud, like I mentioned, they're not interested in you writing paragraphs about your opinion on it. Your opinion is very, very important. However, they don't want you to do that. They want you to write in bullet points, not even full sentences, you might think, as well. So that is just one tiny tip, a very, very small one. And it's actually the tip of the iceberg as well, in terms of the amount of different ways and essential ways in which Cambridge want you to answer the questions in the exam. I don't know what I would have done had I not had guidance from a tutor when I was preparing for the exam, because I'll put it to you like this. Imagine you've got a student of B2 plus level, and you say, right, you've got a great level of English. Here's the first certificate of the exam. They're going to throw themselves out the window or run out of the room as soon as they start opening the reading and use of English paper. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
because it's not authentic, right? Actually, not enough to read authentic materials, I mean, right?
No, it's not, because there's, again, it's like, again, I use the example of keyword transformation. Think of another one. Lana, you were talking about reading earlier on. If a student has never seen a true, false, not given task, if a student has never seen, I don't know, a multiple choice, A, B, C, D, I don't know, maybe they sit down and read the text and think, okay, which options am I going to choose? But then maybe you as a teacher might say, well, actually, in the exam, it's a better idea to read the questions first. And maybe what you should do is underline some of the keywords in the question stem before you even look at the distractors, at the A, B, C, D, and try and make up your own mind about the answers to questions. So, but that's the kind of thing that comes, that's the benefit of having a teacher, because it's not, the candidate may not necessarily think about that themselves, especially not when you've got 2 exams to write in an hour and a half, and the clock is ticking, and one of your prime concerns in the exam is time. Like, it is such a, I mean, like in life in general, obviously, I'm not going to get all metaphysical, but it's such a precious commodity. And in the Delta One exam, it's time is so precious. Just to illustrate the point, what Cambridge assessment used to do is, instead of saying how many marks were available for each task, they used to write at the top of the page the suggested time that the candidate should take for each task. That's just to give you an idea of how important your training for the timing of the exam is, which again is one of my jobs. Yeah.
I see. Thank you so much for such a clear answer. So something that I can also say to answer LJ's concerns. So if you're considering taking Delta One, so Alastair, you can talk to Alastair after this chat.
Yeah, come to me, LJ. I'll help you out.
Yes, come to Alastair and he will guide you. And because Alastair is a fantastic trainer from what I've seen so far. So if you have more questions, if you're looking for a place where to do Delta One, Alastair will be a fantastic fit for this, for doing Delta One. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. So, so those people,
yeah,
myself included, so I did the Delta One, but I never taken the exam so far, unfortunately. So those people, for example, who are considering doing and taking Delta One without doing the other modules, so will it make them more employable? Will it open more job opportunities for them? So what can you say about doing Delta One without the other exams? Because if you have full Delta, all 3 modules, like, this is amazing, right? Like, it immediately will open you a lot of doors. But what can you say, for example, those who are considering, like, maybe for different reasons, right? Like maybe financial or whatever reasons. So is it worth taking Delta One without Delta One, without Delta Two and Delta Three?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. So thank you for asking it. Yeah, and what I can say, I can actually give you a real life example of why the answer to the question is yes, even if for whatever perfectly valid reason one might decide not to go ahead with modules 2 and 3. I must say, you really should go ahead with modules 2 and 3. You being everyone watching this, because apart from anything else, it's such a rewarding experience. But if one were just to do module 1, I know for a fact that, and I'm not going to mention the name of this person, but I will mention the country in which it happened. In Uruguay, I have an ex-candidate of mine, an ex-student of mine, about 4 years ago, I think, took the module 1 and passed. And this person, they were given, on the strength of that, and of course their experience, a position coordinating the English department at their school. Now, this had been offered anyway, but one of the requirements for this was that they wanted this person to get the Delta Module 1. That's a local example of why the answer to the question is yes. And also, it's something else that I should have mentioned earlier on. And this is with all 3 modules of the Delta, okay? But Ofqual, which is the governing body of exam qualifications in the United Kingdom, recognize the full Delta modules 1, 2, and 3 as being on the same level as a master's degree. And it's currently, as I understand it, I think it's the only one that's seen as that level at the moment. There might be another one, I'm not 100% sure, but it's level 7 in the European Union qualifications. Yes. So yeah, sorry, I've gone slightly off tangent, Lana, I beg your pardon, but there's something I wanted to mention earlier on. But the bottom line is yes. And apart from anything else, forgetting about, even if you discount the professional opportunities, honestly, I didn't do it for that. For example, there was no, in the end, I did become director of studies at my institute, which was fantastic, but that was years later. But I did Delta for a different reason, and it was intrinsic motivation. I just really wanted to feel that there was something more profound to, I found it. And that enthusiasm that it gave me was more rewarding than anything, honestly. I mean, professionally, yes, it's opened a lot of doors. And in fact, if you look at the Cambridge website, there's actually a video of one of the directors of an institute in Montevideo in Uruguay talking about how it's opened so many professional doors for him. It's done the same for me worldwide, I have to say. But beyond that, I didn't do it for that reason, Lana. It was just because I really was interested in knowing more about teaching. Another long answer to one of Lana's questions.
No, that's a wonderful answer, a long, wonderful answer, Alastair. Thank you so much. Actually, if I'm allowed just to add, I can say from my own experience as a English teacher. In the past, I was more active English teacher. Now I'm also working in other different areas. So from my own experience, I can say, like, whoever is considering this, like whether they should do or they shouldn't do Delta One. So if you have an opportunity, do this. And the earlier you do this, the more opportunities will open up for you. This is definitely what I can say from my experience. There's one lady who often asks me, like, did you take the exam? Did you take the exam? And I always find excuses.
Really?
And she, like, sometimes she talks to me about like good job opportunities, like job opportunities with very good salaries. And I just, like, each time I realize, like, oh, like I should do this. I should do this as soon as possible. At least having Delta One, it's already like, because a lot of schools also, they, even if you don't have it, they can hire you, right? But then they want to see you actually do it as you also work for this company, right? Like doing all Delta modules. So definitely, yes. Okay, there's one more question. Okay, here I will ask my question, and also there was a question from Carolina, who asked, where can I teach with Delta One certification? That was actually on the list of our points. So can you say, like, maybe about jobs, maybe about countries? You spoke also before, I remember, about Delta Celta countries also in South America and the way they recognize these qualifications. Or maybe some companies, you can mention specific companies also. So, so after you do the course, after you take the exam, what jobs, maybe in what countries or companies you become qualified for after passing the Delta One module?
Okay, perfect. Well, one of the things to say, first of all, is that internationally, this is why, Cambridge have done what they've done in terms of this teaching qualification. It's the most widely recognized English language teaching qualification that there is. So in terms of countries, I can simply say what I know, which is that throughout Europe, for example, that's the standard that they want their teachers to have. Now, the initial qualification is the CELTA certificate in English language teaching, and then, like we've been saying, the Delta is the diploma level. So, if it really, for a start, it really depends on the employer. I can say, for example, as someone who is the head of department at a school for English, I can say that if somebody came to me in a job interview and they have Delta One, I'm going to be super interested in interviewing that candidate, because the level of commitment that think about a university degree as well. And it's one of the reasons employers want people to have university degrees, because that person who's applying for a job has shown up every day for like 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it's been, and they've worked hard and they've done the same thing and they've committed and committed and committed. Therefore, if I see somebody comes to an interview with a Delta One, I think, wow, okay, so they've done that. There's that level of commitment, because it's got to be said, with my hand on my heart, like with most courses, people can drop out sometimes. That does happen, because even if the candidate has, or the teacher has all the information available for them at the beginning, which every center tries to provide, there's a difference between that and what actually happens, because there is commitment. Of course, there is commitment in terms of time, and there's commitment in terms of you applying yourself as well. So, like I say, as as somebody who runs an English department, if I've got someone who has got a Delta 1 qualification, I'm really interested in hiring that person. Obviously, I'm going to be wanting to interview them, et cetera, but that would make a massive difference to me. And what's interesting about the Delta in that way is that it's the diploma level, so requires that bit much. I'm going to say that bit much more commitment. That would be all 3 modules, but definitely requires a level of depth in terms of the background of teaching that earlier teaching qualifications don't necessarily have. What I can't do is say, okay, definitely these countries and definitely these companies, because that is going to vary. What I can say, though, is that my understanding is that in Europe, at least, and I believe in North America, that they want, as an internationally recognized teaching qualification, that's what they want people to have, if that's what I would say.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, because, for example, if I was an employer and I would have like many or several candidates, let's say, right? And if I saw that somebody, for example, has only CELTA, or somebody maybe doesn't have any qualifications, and if I see somebody has CELTA, Delta, let's say, definitely this person would be the person who I would want to interview, because really it does matter. From what I can say, I worked in different countries for many different companies, and those people actually who have CELTA, at least CELTA, but if it's Delta, this would be fantastic. Their teaching techniques, their teaching approaches really differ from those teachers who have never done CELTA or Delta. So definitely, if you're considering doing Delta 1, Alastair would be happy to answer all of your questions and to assist you with all of your concerns. And also you can join his course, which is going to start in August, right? Okay,
yes, that's
and
right.
Also one more comment, and then I guess we can wrap up. I believe this is from one of your potential students, whose name is Fabian, who says,
yes.
Hi, Alastair. So, okay, hello, Fabian. Looking forward to seeing you in August. I know you're an amazing trainer. Yes, that's for sure, I can say. And I've been trying to read the materials you shared. So it's true, trying to prepare for the exam on our own stuff. Yes, and the trainer can make a difference. I'm enjoying the experience, though. Yes, definitely, I can say, like, when I also tried to prepare myself, sometimes I get demotivated because there's no one to give me feedback, right? And I'm the kind of person who needs a push, like I told you, Alastair, before. So so a lot of people, I guess, can relate to my experience. So Fabian, I believe you found an amazing trainer who can guide you all the way through. So like you can have the enjoyable learning process, as you said before, Alastair, and finally reach your goal and pass this exam. Right.
Yeah,
so,
no, and I'm really glad that, I'm just going to say, I'm really glad, Fabian, that you're looking at the material. That's something else to say, that what I've done for the course is made sure that everybody who joins has 2 things, apart from anything else, apart from the learning platform access, etc., is a pre-course task to do before we actually start on August the 4th. And is that the first Friday in August? I'm now questioning. Yes, it is. Thank goodness. Right. I have a pre-course task and also some pre-course reading as well. It's not a lot to do, but it's just so that, you know, my candidates can get their heads in the zone before we actually start.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alastair, for this wonderful chat. Thank you so much to everyone who have joined us today. Those of you who have not been, who were not be able to watch us, so this video will be on YouTube, and also later on it will be on our event page, because we had in the beginning some technical issues. So we apologize for this, that we couldn't actually stream from that event, that it had to be on my profile. So thank you so much, Alastair. I learned also a lot from you. I loved your answers. And thank you everyone who watched us today, everyone who asked us wonderful questions. So many, many thanks to everyone.
No, thank you, Lana. It's been a real pleasure to be here and to speak to you and to have these questions to answer from everyone as well. Hope we can do something similar again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yes, if any of you is considering doing the course or the exam, definitely you can talk to Alastair about it, and he will be more than happy to tell you more about the course. Okay, so thank you so much. Okay, there's one more question. Is it okay if we address this question?
Yes,
Alastair?
of course. Yeah, go ahead. No problem at all. Yeah.
Okay, there is asking which are the pre-course materials to be read before taking the course. By the way, that's important. You spoke a little bit about this before.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a few, and I would make some recommendations of books. My pre-course material that I've got includes a task that's got to do with awareness of the different parts of the exam. But also there's some text that I want candidates to look at as well. What I will say, so as not to bombard everyone with information, is probably a really good start, a really good generic book to have a look at is something like The Practice of English Language Teaching by Jeremy Harmer, I would say, because for many parts of the, not just for the exam, but for teaching in general, that's just incredibly useful generic look at all parts of the learning process. And then it's why it's one of my recommended readings. And then we go in more depth into the specifics of the different skills and the systems.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And also one question I had for you, Alastair. This course that you are going to run in that starts in August, is it online or face-to-face? And also, is it full-time or part-time?
Okay, so it's online, and it's definitely part-time in as much as it's 2 hours on a Friday, and there were three time slots, but the first time slot is full. So the two available time slots are between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and 3:30 and 5:30 in the afternoon, and that is at UTC -3. So that's also Buenos Aires time in Argentina as well, UTC -3. But it's those 2 hours of input once a week on those Fridays. And apart from that, like I say, I need candidates to be doing 1 to 2 hours of coursework a week as well. Not only that, one more thing to say about that, Lana, is that apart from that, what I don't want is for candidates to feel like it's just about the classes, and if people don't keep up in the classes, then that's the end of it. It's not like that at all. The idea is that apart from the classes themselves, we'll also have tutorials. So if somebody has specific questions about any part of the exam or any part of the course, then we will have a one-to-one tutorial about that. So that people aren't feeling like they just have to, sink or swim, like I say.
Yes, that's a good expression. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's all. There are no more questions. So thank you so much again. Thank you so much, Alastair. Thank you so much, everyone. So again, as we said before, if you have any more questions, you can contact me, and I can get you in touch with Alastair, or you can contact him directly. You can find him on social media. So many thanks for your precious time. I hope that was useful. Definitely it was useful. So enjoy your evening or day or morning, because I know that people who have been watching us are from different time zones. So many thanks. I wish to all the educators to stay positive, to pursue educational dreams, and to not to procrastinate like me with taking exams. So do the courses, take the exams, and a lot of opportunities will be opening up for you in the future. So okay, thank you. So see you, everyone.
Thank you, Lana. Bye. See you all soon. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.